Let's try this. So, most people don't really want to listen to finance talks, learning about money, stocks, investing. So, I'm going to play video games while I talk to you about it. So that way you have something to look at. Because I don't really want you just staring at me the whole time. So, I have no idea if this is going to work, but we're going to try this. So, yeah, I'm Jordan. This is Financial Assassin's Creed. And one of the reasons I'm even doing this is I've been feeling that there's a void missing in financial media where people are being taught what anything means. And honestly, I think people have probably a lot more questions than they let on. And most people, if you were to ask them something like, what's a bond? They're probably going to tell you they know, but they might not know. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to combine a little visual effects and honestly some applications of this game to the concept I'm going to talk about today. So yeah, let's give this a shot because you know what? The world needs to learn about money and why it's important. Because let's be honest, what's the point of a job? I mean, if you're sitting at a 9 to 5 that you hate, you're doing it probably for money, right? And if you're not doing it for money and you're doing a job you hate and you have a lot of money, I don't have anything for you there. But if you're somebody who's like, I gotta go work because I need that money, that dough, that cashola, then I think it's important you spend 5 seconds or however long this video is, at least 5 seconds, probably five to more. Any amount is going to be good if you think about money. But you're going to work in this job, making this money, and yet what is money? You know, like what has led us to this point in time where we have a president's face chilling on a piece of paper. It's all green. And we just accept that as currency. Accept that as what we call a medium of exchange. And the reason why that's important is because it hasn't always been that way. And so we're playing Assassin's Creed here. I'm just kind of toting around here on a boat. I'm going to be heading to a mission here soon, so that way there's something more exciting to watch. But we're looking at this because here's a time where they didn't have the US dollar during this era. I think what you loot in this game is what's called reals. Probably not even saying that right, but they're going to have a certain amount of money or a currency that you're going to try to get. But let's think about it. So back in the day, gold and silver were utilized as coins because you don't want to go around with a giant hunk of gold. It's pretty hard. You're not going to be able to just cut it willy-nilly in an exact measurement. So you develop coins because you can weigh the coin and you're going to carry a specific weight because that way you can buy multiple things instead of having this one giant hunk of gold that, what if you need a piece of bread? How are you going to pay for a piece of bread if you have a hunk of gold that will get you a million pieces of bread? So you're going to go out and you're going to get these coins. You're going to manufacture coins and silver and gold and Eventually, we started using copper with pennies, but you do that because if we didn't have what we call a medium of exchange, which is what money is today, if we didn't have that, um, then we would have to rely on bartering. And that could mean taking that their whale and hunting it. And now I have whale product that I can take to whatever port and trade it. But the issue I'm going to rise there is uh, there's going to be no measure of value. So, yeah, I might be able to sell my whale blubber to, a Johnny merchant, and he might be able to give me some, uh, apples. And let's say a pound of whale blubber is going to give me 10 apples. Um, then I go and I have to go buy new sails for my boat. Well, how much is that? And then let's say the Apple guy wants to go buy sails. So what is the equivalent value of each of these products to allow you to exchange? And it gets difficult because you also have to rely on the fact that the person you're getting the product from, they actually want what you have. And if you have whale and they don't want whale, they don't necessarily want to trade with you. So brings us then back to a point of okay, so okay, I start to see why you want gold and silver in a coin fashion. I guess maybe still don't understand specifically the coin fashion yet. But at this juncture, you're going to want to understand the fact that you don't want to barter and you don't want to be having to trail only whale. You want to have some other way to take your whale and then be able to take the value that you can get from selling it. But now you want to be able to take that value and use it to buy whatever it is you need. And so you also want something that isn't perishable. I mean, how long is that whale going to stay good for? Like if you're just a whale hunter, you got to worry about preserving it. And, you can't just keep a whale around forever because, yeah, like I said, it's going to go bad. And so it all eventually leads to this point of we want to be able to have something that we can use to exchange with people, to get products we want, to face giant rogue waves, I guess, that I'm about to come in contact with. Oh, there it is. And what are we talking about? All right, we're talking about how we even got to this point with money. So we're talking about gold coins and gold, silver, and you're wanting to know, all right, so I'm the whale hunter and I don't want to keep my whale around. I don't want to barter with it. So we're all on the same page. Okay, fine. Gold and silver. Why gold and silver though? I mean, it's pretty, it's shiny, it's hard. Um, well, you want to have something that has a high value to weight ratio. And gold is been deemed valuable because it has some very good pure qualities about it that allow it to be stored and held and maintain its integrity, as well as silver. And so you can keep a gold bar for years and years and years. You don't have to worry about it going bad. All right. And so once we as a society all got together and said, okay, fine, we'll take gold, and everyone kind of agrees with it. It's funny because we're playing a pirate game where rule of law isn't even readily accepted by people, meaning there isn't a single government that has rule of law over every single town and island. And, you know, these pirates can pretty much get away with what they want because, I mean, for one, it'd be really tough without being able to track to know who, what, did when. But um, it's just not everyone respects the form of government at this time, but they respect the currency. So that speaks to the nature of humans, that we'll all readily accept some convenient way of transacting with money. But yeah, we've never been big fans of government, I guess. Um, okay, so we've got a lot of these qualities that are starting to arise. So we need something that's divisible because we don't want the big chunk of bar. We need something that is accepted by everyone because what's the good of having gold and coins if there is no one who wants gold and coins? So, all right, so we got people that want golden coins because we also have a measure of value. Now, you can take 10 gold coins and get a sale. You can also take one gold coin and get a piece of bread. But that gold coin's value now has a identifier to it that is more easily comparable versus a pound of blubber equals 4 apples, but maybe another guy wants it more. So for him, he'll give you 7 apples. So there isn't really a way to compare the value of whale blubber. And maybe you're in, I don't know, Alaska where they really want that whale blubber. I mean, they might pay more. So again, it's just another reason why having this measure of value is important so that everything can kind of take shape and be compared. And so, okay, so we got all that. We've got the fact that it also needs to be divisible so that you can buy multiple things, not perishable, store of value, because you don't want it to, you know, there's a difference, right? So it's the reason why you think about gold as a store of value versus, let's say, um, Pokemon cards. Because who's not to say? I mean, there's definitely a case to be made that Pokemon cards have made a lot of um, gains and have accrued in value um, quite a lot, especially over these last couple of years since COVID. Um, but the thing that matters the most when it comes to these kind of niche collector markets is that, yeah, the money's good until it isn't, because there's not necessarily always going to be that demand for them. And so you'll definitely get a lot of these volatile highs and lows when it comes to certain kind of collectible items. And that's not, just a recent thing either. Um, One of the original stories of money and some of the ways that people would use money were like the best story is the tulip um, craze in Holland, where they accepted tulip flowers as a means of currency, and the value of them went so high that everyone was accruing these tulips, and it worked until it didn't. And I mean, it makes sense now, obviously, but you can imagine at the time, tulips were this age is Bitcoin. And so, I mean, what is Bitcoin? Most people can't even tell you. So, and what value were tulips going to bring? I don't know if anyone would have been able to tell you. But that's the thing about money and value, is that it can be erratic at times, and make you make you wonder, if you have it in the right places. But back to the Pokemon analogy. This guy let me. Oh, all right. So, well, all right. Back to the Pokemon analogy. So yeah, so right now you might be saying, the value of Pokemon have gone up more than the stock market, and you might be right at this specific time frame. But the problem is what I was mentioning earlier. You got to have a market that is rip roaring at the time for these collectibles, because if there isn't that perceived value for whatever it is, then it doesn't necessarily have any value. Because if we all of a sudden decided that gold was not valuable, then we wouldn't accept it. The value of gold would go down. And so the reason why I kind of compare gold, let's say, to Pokemon cards is gold is widely regarded as a store of wealth, a medium of exchange, a type of currency. It is the longest held type of currency that has been used in the history of money. And so, as a result, what happens is a lot of countries and banks are big, big holders of gold. And when you have that perception so ingrained in some of these societies, you're not going to see. I mean, you've seen some get, uh, into Bitcoin, but in general, gold will be that form of wealth that banks and those that have the power um, to make decisions are using. So I would say, if you're thinking about the longevity of how long somebody will accept something as a currency, I mean, for one, I take it as, one, first of all, the gold is the longest held currency and used as a currency. But up until Richard Nixon was our president, I think it was Nixon. This isn't a history show, right? We're talking about money, but we used to be on what was called a gold standard. So, gold standard is where your dollar was tied to a physical amount of gold held in. I'm trying to remember the name. But there was a bank, an area where we used to keep all of our gold. Up until we decided that we wanted to go off the gold standard, and that's probably for another day, another time. But since then, and where we are currently, is our money is not backed or tied to any asset of value, but it's in relation to the supply of it. And so when we talk about the supply of money, um, that's going to be a few different things, because money is a really hard thing to kind of keep track of, right? Because it's something to buy goods, but nowadays we have things like debit cards, credit cards, um, gift cards. And so we have some ways that are probably a little less fine-tuned, but we can check the money, because we need to know the amount of money that is out there. Because if we don't know how much money is out there, then you don't realize that when there's nothing tied to your dollar, and the dollar is just based on its supply of it, then what people need to realize is inflation then is just the government's inability to manage the supply of money. I shouldn't say government. It's more of the central bank, but it's also the government as well, because the government, while the government doesn't directly affect the central bank, they do pick the who runs it. They're more involved with expenditures and dealing with taxation and licensing and creating easier, harder means of buying or selling things. But the central bank is what is involved with the monetary policy. So money, monetary, money, monetary. Um, and they ultimately are trying, well, they have a what's called a dual mandate. So the central bank is supposed to be involved with keeping the supply of jobs and unemployment down, while also managing the money supply and the rate of inflation. And so historically the target has been 2%. But as of our last inflation reading, we were at year over year 4%. So obviously not 2%. And again, you might be like, Jordan, I honestly do not care about this thing you're saying, inflation. And that's fair. Maybe you make a bunch of money and you don't have to care. But if you're like most people I know, chances are you're just sitting your money in a bank. And yeah, you might have a 401k, but like everything outside of that, you're just sitting in that bank account. You're just sitting in that Fifth Third, that Huntington, that name a bank. And what the heck? I have to become anonymous? Well, that's tough. Right. Name ow. Alright. We got this. Clearly I'm focused on the playing of this game. But name a bank that you have, X amount of dollars at. And let me tell you, it wasn't always this way. It wasn't always this way where you had to worry so much about the inflation, because you used to be able to get what's called a yield, meaning you were able to make interest on the money you held in your bank. And so a bank wanted you to hold money there, and they would offer you X amount of percent, you know, a year annualized to be able to incentivize you to keep your money there. Well, eventually that stopped, and I can't really speak to what happened necessarily with banks and why they stopped offering any sort of yields. But what I can tell you is that it's probably one of the single biggest reasons why inflation is so tough on people um, that don't have any knowledge of finance and money, is because these people are going to work so hard. You're going to work so hard if you're someone who's like, yeah, I got a 9 to 5. I bust my buttons because I need to make money for whatever it is. Maybe it's Pokemon cards, maybe it's a family. I don't know. But you're going to need to make money. And if I'm sitting here playing this game telling you that your money just lost 4% in your bank over the last year because the government was unable to handle the money supply in a way that prevented this from occurring. And so because of it, if you're sitting in that in a bank account with 100 grand, and this last year you just lost $4,000 worth of buying power, just like that. And I'll tell you, that's the same as somebody coming along and physically taking money from you, in a way, because you have to think of it this way. With inflation, you needed that 100 grand to move up to $104,000 to match inflation. And so if you're saying now that you're at your 100 grand stayed at 100 grand, now you've lost money. And we're just talking about how hard it is at your 9 to 5, and you want to go and you want to lose an additional $4,000 a year and 100 grand, if that's the amount. It's whatever the amount is, and times 4%. And I don't know about you, but I eventually started learning these numbers and realizing, and if you've made it this far, I mean, one, tell me if this is enjoyable at all, if this was worth doing. But two, it's also the most valuable part, because I want to let you know that there's ways. There's ways to help this. There's ways that you don't need to be any guru. You don't need to have somebody who's, trying or has their CFA. You don't need a financial accountant. You can do simple things to help. And honestly, all you need to do is combat inflation. So I'll tell you, there are bank accounts and what are called money market funds, CDs, treasuries, treasury funds. There are all sorts of what we deem riskless assets, because there are certain things that are guaranteed by the faith of the US government. And there are also places that have realized that if we maintain your funds here and we allow you to deposit more and more, and we give you just a little bit, then we can go invest into other things that are yielding more. And so it makes sense for them, with the superior knowledge, to want to have your deposits. So with all that, to say that, go look on Robinhood. It's the easiest, fastest, most accessible way, and most people probably know Robinhood. But Robinhood has a current offer for 3.55% a year just for sitting your cash there. So it's not that 4% that is kind of toasty as far as inflation goes. But now you've taken that 100 grand and you've turned it into 103,500. And so you've at least now prevented a full $4,000 loss, and you haven't done any more work. I mean, it's just you put the money in another place. Um, I like to say, unlike what my character here is doing, you got to have your money go make friends, and you want him to make as many friends as just possible. Because the more friends your money can make you, then the less you really have to work in the long run. If you have, let's say, let's get crazy here. So the reason why you would even think about putting your money into the market now that you know all of this information, you know about the inflation, you know that you've needed to gain 4% just to be able to have the same buying power as last year. Um, Now let's say you're someone who, you know what, you've got that bank account and you're like, yeah, I've got my retirement, I've got my 401k, I'm safe, I've got my match from my company. I've got a 6 month of emergency fund yielding 3.5% now. You can start to look at things like, okay, well, what's this thing? What's this 10% in the market that everyone keeps talking about? And now what you can do is, you think about how much you're willing to put into a market, knowing that in the long run you'll be fine, but at any given moment is the issue. So while yes, over the course of your life, your investment into the broader market, the index or a ETF, um, should, if it is invested wisely, it should go up over time. But the issue becomes if it's a amount of funds that you need at certain times. And if you need it in X number of years, you can't guarantee a market in which you'll be able to sell at that time for its highest value. So I'll tell you, it was probably a pretty winded. I don't even know if I made a lot of sense. I think I did, but trying to concentrate on this game as well as talk about money was interesting back and forth. But I think we got there together. Um, so I am not a financial analyst yet, but do more research. Make Think about this stuff. Think about money. Think about inflation. Think about the fact that you're working super duper hard. And if you don't want to work super duper hard, maybe you are. Maybe you enjoy just busting your butt and giving inflation your money. And in which case, congrats. This is great for you. But if you don't want your money to be eaten away, um, do something about it. Find a riskless way. Do your research. Talk to somebody. Talk to an analyst. Talk to a financial guy. Talk to your parents. And maybe they all have means of helping you prevent your hard earned cash from becoming just less and less every year. With that, Death, thanks for tuning in. See you next time.